Welcome to Reddit Reader. Today we are going to explore the r/AskReddit, where your most thought-provoking questions get answered.
On this video, we are going to explore this question on r/AskReddit. What are your worst bridezilla stories? We weren't allowed to talk directly to the bride. Her mom and maid of honor were the only ones allowed to. I'm a bridal wear designer, and I've worked for a few medium to large-sized brands as well as for individual clients. I started off working in a boutique selling bridal gowns, bridesmaid dresses, and all the stuff that goes with it. I have a lot of stories, but here's a couple of my favorites. Last thing on a very hot, very busy Saturday on my own, a very glamorous and slender bridal party walk-in. Bride, mother plus 3 maids have come in to see their bridesmaid dresses, then try on to be altered. They had ordered them about 4 months before. These dresses were the hot thing at the time, floor length, crepe back satin and bias cut in a steely gray. All seemed fine. First bridesmaids come out and I pinned the hem and talked through any additional stuff. The mother is super picky and the bride is very much obsessed with her perfect day, but that's pretty much normal. Last bridesmaid comes out, and the hem is lifted over an inch from the ground on her left side but is over 2 inches too long for the rest of the hem, so it looks incredibly wonky. Bride nearly breaks down and mother goes basically catatonic, wedding is ruined, going to sue us to hell, etc. Bridesmaid looks rather sheepish. I offered to get them a new dress and promised it would be sorted, but I needed to talk to the owner to get full details, but that it would be resolved within a week. I had a suspicion, so went into the changing room with the bridesmaid to help her out of the dress, and she looked rather upset. I told her again we could sort it and she would look great in the end, but it didn't seem to help, so I asked if everything was okay or if there is something she wants to tell me. She near bursts into tears and tells me she's so sorry, but she's pregnant. She'd been trying for a while, but the bride had told her she wasn't allowed to get pregnant and ruin her wedding. She was only 4 weeks, but with the style of dress it meant the fabric lifted like it did with just the tiniest of bumps. You really have to be a flat-stomached wonder for them not to do weird things. She was really stressed about not being able to tell anyone till after the wedding, and getting through the hem/bachelorette party with no one realizing she was pregnant and the bride losing it with her. I was in a difficult place because the bride was threatening us for something that wasn't our fault. I agreed with the bridesmaid that I wouldn't say anything, but after the wedding she would need to tell the bride that we helped, not hindered the situation. She was super grateful and I managed to fix the dress for her, but she paid for it, while the bride thought we were covering it. The bride did send in a thank you card after the wedding, so I guess it all worked out in the end for her. While working for a big brand, we had a customer care team who were the most amazingly patient people I've ever met, rarely batted an eyelid. One day a giggling customer came into us after having what they described as the phone call of the year, and you can imagine how many ridiculous questions they have daily. Important for context is that we produced a few brands under our company with designers' names, but they are just made-up names that suit the style of the line. For this I'm going to say that one of the lines was Sophie Seymour. The phone call went like this. Customer, hi. I was in your XX store today and I really liked the XX style dress, but I need it in a size 24. Care, okay, I'll just do a search to see if we have that in our network. I'm sorry, but it looks like that style only goes up to a size 20. Could you tell me what you liked about it and I'll see if I can suggest some alternatives? Customer, no, I need that dress, and actually I know Sophie Seymour, she said she'll make me my dress specially in my size. So how long do you think it will be until you can get that into store? My wedding is in a year. Okay, I'm sorry, we don't do customer orders. But I'd be happy to help you find another alternative. We have a whole new plus size range. Customer, no. You don't understand. Sophie is a family friend, and if you don't do this, I'm going to call her and she'll just do it for me, and your company won't get the sale. So what's the timeline? I also want more beating, and Sophie said that I could use her staff discount too. This continued for a while. We were seriously considering calling her back as Sophie Seymour. Oh, and she called back and spoke to other care reps and told them the same thing, as well as trying it in a store. Unsurprisingly, she never got the dress from us, and all the staff were too polite to tell her that Sophie Seymour was a made-up person. I was an alterations specialist at David's Bridal. Never again. Did Sophie actually begin with an O? We had an issue with stressed-out brides losing weight after fittings. The worst one, however, was a lady who was fitted before I started working there, and I somehow gained an insane amount of weight. Like from a size 20 to a 32. The dress went up to a 24, but we're not fucking wizards. Even our little Peruvian seamstress, who was magic or had mutant powers, was stumped. I think she ended up tearing apart 2 dresses and building one super dress. She was the freaking Tony Stark of alterations. I am a commercial, not wedding, photographer. Best friend since first grade asks me to photograph his twin sister's wedding because they don't have the budget for a pro that does weddings. I figure out my costs and tell them I'll do it for a break-even fee of $400, about 1/4 of what they'd pay otherwise, and they agree. Supposed to pay me on the day things are going on, she's panicking, doesn't have checkbook but promises to pay cash later, okay. Follow them around from 9:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. hearing from both the bride and groom that they got enough cash as gifts and they'd settle up right away, never happens. They'll email transfer me, okay. A week later, I'm about 10 hours into what would become 30 hours of editing 250 final photos and still no money, bills from my expenses coming due. Text them, no reply. Had to ask my friend, find out they took off on a month-long honeymoon in Europe. Their dad finally called and paid me instead, and I mailed them the photos. They all went on her Facebook, she seemed happy, friends and family seemed happy, not a word of thanks. 6 months later, she starts getting my buddy to ask me for all of the photos I took, almost 1,400, to do her own editing, which most professionals, including myself, would never allow, and I say as much, and ask why it never came up before. She starts putting shitty Instagram filters on the final photos and posting them with passive-aggressive comments about how the photographer won't come through, so she has to improve what she's got, etc. Buddy and I have a more strained relationship because I had to put my foot down. I don't shoot weddings or offer friend discounts anymore, with no exceptions. Oh man, I have one I just had to deal with, though thankfully at a distance. One of my high school friends just got married a few weeks ago. We've known each other since we were in diapers, so even though I live in a different country, I RSVP'd I'd come. Now, I did it via text, because I didn't know how long it'd take for the reply to get to her. She freaked out that I wasn't doing it properly, and bitched that I needed to spend the money on stamps to send it back. Okay, I get her point, even though I think it's stupid. I ended up getting a call shortly after she got my response, 3 weeks later, by the way, telling me only my son and I were invited, not my husband. I asked why and she refused to answer me, eventually getting pissed and telling me I shouldn't come. I talked to a friend who was standing up in the wedding party, and apparently she made it pretty obvious she was embarrassed to be marrying down. She was always the hot one of our friend group, and she thought her husband wasn't as good looking as she deserved. So she decided to not invite any of the good-looking husbands of her female friends, especially if those friends weren't as pretty as she was. A sister of mine. Wedding starts late because bride and groom are day drinking. Bride is mad that her new husband is super drunk before dinner, so instead of helping him sober up, proceeds to get loser pissed drunk as well because it's her day too. Then is mad that people didn't stay for cake. It's 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and you're just getting to the cake now. People have jobs to go to and we all got here at 10 a.m. Cousins also robbed all the liquor from the bar and stole some of the gifts. Mom breaks her arm and the venue was vandalized, but how dare people leave before the cake? Not mine, and I was unfortunately not even there for it, but my wife got the skinny from a close friend who was a bridesmaid. You have to understand that my friend Dash, we'll call her Katie, is quite possibly the sweetest and most loving person under the sun. Seriously. Coming from the family that she did, it's a wonder. She was the family punching bag. Whenever something went wrong, it was Katie's fault. It didn't matter who did it, how it happened, the fact that Katie was in another state at the time. The entire family, including her two sisters, would gang up and yell at her. So Katie's sister, Crystal, is getting married into a conservative Greek Orthodox family. She's losing her mind because she wants so bad for her new family to think she's perfect, which is laughable, but whatever. Of course, the morning of the wedding, everything is going wrong, and how dare Katie do this, despite the fact that Katie wasn't even awake when everything started happening. Makeup if misplaced, boxes haven't been taken up to the church for decorating, the works. So they all load up and head to the church to get the place ready. Katie grabs a box nearly as big as her, if she's 5 feet 1 inch, then I'm Danny DeVito, hauls it into the church, and asks Crystal where it needs to go, to which she responds, "Oh my God, Katie, just set it down somewhere." Katie, being the sweetheart she is, sets it down somewhere out of the way so people won't trip on it, but still in a higher traffic area so it can be found. She goes to put on her dress because some of the groomsmen are putting up the decorations. Of course, Crystal screeches like a banshee not 10 minutes later because something in the box Katie had carried and needed refrigeration, but Katie was not informed of that. Not only was it not in the refrigerator, but Katie clearly hid it so nobody else could find it because she was trying to ruin the wedding. Katie apologizes and shows her where the box is. She finishes applying her makeup when she's informed that there's been a change in the ceremony as far as the handling of the bouquet goes. Katie will hold Crystal's bouquet. The other sister couldn't do it for whatever reason. It was probably too heavy for her poor, dainty arms. So Katie verifies how that's going to work. "So you give it to me, there's some talking, you and Carl walk around the altar a few times, then I give it back to you?" Crystal doesn't answer, and after a few more questions, she dismissively says, yeah, you give it back to me." During the ceremony, Crystal never makes a move to take the bouquet back, and does not accept it when offered. Katie is yelled at about this after the ceremony. After the reception, Crystal asks Katie to take some things out to her new husband's car for her. She does, but it's locked. He doesn't have the keys. Nobody knows who has the keys. This is also Katie's fault. She gets yelled at. She finally finds the keys and gets it put away when Crystal asks Katie to clean up the last little bit of the room she got ready in for her. This is 15 minutes before the church is being closed. The room is completely wrecked. No efforts were even close to being made to put things away. Katie is a champ and cleans it in 10, gets the stuff out to the car. She wasn't fast enough and Crystal yells at her because she wanted to leave. To top all this off, Crystal and Carl are going on 2 separate 2-week honeymoons and refuse to come back a day early to go to Katie's rehearsal dinner for her wedding next month. They're flying in on the day of the wedding and frankly, I hope they get delayed past the wedding. The farther she is from the wedding, the less she can ruin it. Oh, and Crystal had moved her wedding up after she heard the date of Katie's wedding because she threw a shit fit about Katie getting married first. How dare she? The karmic justice here is that despite the fact that none of the sisters are above 21, Crystal looks like a 40-year-old. Katie is easily the only attractive one in the family. Went to a wedding that was a dry wedding only. She refused to let anyone bring alcohol, and the wedding was in the middle of nowhere. The wedding was several hours before the reception, and there was absolutely nothing to do. There was no entertainment, no food, no drinks, etc. We had to wait for 4+ hours for them. Then the bridal party shows up, and they had alcohol for themselves. Our entire group left. I recently went to a friend's wedding. I've known him 20 years and he always tells me he considers me one of his best friends. Top 3 sort of thing at any given time. I don't know what I'd do with you and I hope we always remain friends. I asked to give a speech at his wedding. He told me they weren't doing speeches. I asked if there would be wedding parties in case I was in it. I was told there would be no wedding parties or best man/maid of honor. I attended the wedding. There was a wedding party, I was not in it, there was a best man, I was not him and there were, of course, speeches. Some friend. I'm done with him. When my best friend from high school married his first wife, he asked that my then 4-year-old daughter, and his goddaughter, be a flower girl. His fiancée, Bridezilla, chose a dress for my daughter that cost $600. I gently explained that we didn't have $600 to spend on a dress. She blew up. Cried, yelled, etc. Finally calmed her down and found a dress at Macy's for $80. Still way out of my price range at the time, but we made it work. As we got closer to the big day, she called to tell me that I would need to leave early from work the Friday before the event. Drive my 4-year-old daughter 2 hours away to spend the night with her and her friends in a hotel room and be prepared to fork out $250 for her hair and makeup in the morning. My daughter doesn't really know any of you. 2. I wouldn't trust you to care for a hamster, let alone my kid. 3. You and your sorority sisters plan to get shit-faced while my kid does, what? 4. $250? For hair and makeup on my 4-year-old LD? No. I'll do her hair. I'll even let her wear a little bit of makeup, she'll be thrilled. We'll meet you at the church half an hour before the ceremony. Bridezilla says fine, but if she shows up looking like a hooker, I'll kill you." She was obviously pissed. Day of, we show up with my daughter looking adorable. She napped in the car, had a snack, kept herself and her pretty dress clean, and was thrilled to be a flower girl. Not her first flower girl gig either. This was at least her third time. She was a pro. Bridezilla wanted her to practice before the ceremony. The poor kid got yelled at for not scattering the petals evenly. Then she got yelled at for watching a butterfly instead of paying attention to the bridezilla yelling at the rest of the wedding party. We finally got the thing started, made it through, and went outside the church to congratulate bridezilla and groom. Daughter came running to me, and my husband for hugs, and bridezilla freaked out. She insisted that daughter stay with the wedding party and not go with us to the reception. Daughter was okay with that, since she knew one of the guys in the wedding party and would get to ride in the limo. She was starving, though, and when I tried to offer her one of the snacks I'd brought, bridezilla said no way since they were going to get pictures taken. We went our separate ways and waited at the reception for 2 hours before they finally showed up. Daughter was so hungry she was near tears when she finally saw us. I snuck her some goldfish crackers while the first dance and cake cutting took place. All she wanted to do was dance with her uncle, my best friend, and eat. Bridezilla decreed that no one was allowed to dance with the groom but her. She would make an exception for him to have one dance with his mother. My daughter asked her politely if she could have one dance with her uncle and was told no. When he came over and picked my daughter up to hug her, bridezilla got mad and told him to put her down. Now that they were married, all physical affection was hers alone. I wasn't even allowed to hug him. His mother wasn't allowed to hug him. Thank God she cheated on him and he divorced her. I was in a wedding for a girl who wasn't a super close friend, but we each had the same best friend, so I ended up being in the wedding. We had to sign a contract vowing to a few things like 1. We wouldn't get any fake tans because no one was allowed to be tanner than her. Also, no tan lines on our lesser tan skin. 2. No false lashes, her lashes were to be the longest. 3. No teeth whitening done. Her smile was to shine the brightest, exact from quote from the contract. 4. $400 bridesmaid's dress and $100 shoes plus $250 rented jewelry we had to buy on our own, despite the fact her family was loaded and I was so broke. Looking back, I wish I would have had the courage to just decline. It was awful. My brother's brother-in-law was getting married. He had a daughter from a previous relationship who was 10 or 11 at the time of the wedding, and he had a second child that was 2 with this new soon-to-be wife. The new wife wouldn't allow the older daughter to be at the wedding because she's not mine and I don't want her distracting people. I am so glad my 2 daughters' other mom, aka stepmother, isn't like that. My ex-husband has 2 biological children, one from each marriage, but to him and his family. He has 4 kids, including one of mine and one of hers. DNA doesn't play into the situation. He and I were already divorced when I had my youngest from a brief and abusive relationship, but he has always been her daddy. When they got married, she actually asked me for some ways to make the day special for my girls as she wanted to include them but didn't want them to think she was taking over my role. Whenever his family comes out west to visit from back east, she'll invite me over as she knows I still get along with them. He and I just got married too young. While she and I haven't always personally got along, the kids' needs have always come first. When they're now 10 years old asked me in front of her when he was 4 years old of her if he can call me mom too since his sisters do, I froze. I didn't want to step on her toes. She piped up and said of course you can. Their mom is also your mom just like I'm their mom. We are each mom to our biological children, and mama to the other woman's children. Makes my heart melt. Now, more than a dozen years later, all 4 of the kids have 2 mothers and 1 father. Her son's father is also out of the picture just like my youngest daughter's whatever you want to call him. And her boys will even stay at my house every now and then even though their sisters are grown and out of the house. Our oldest daughter said to me recently, "Mom, thank you for never taking bad about Mama in front of us even if you two didn't agree." No matter what, kids learn by example. Treat others with kindness, love, and respect, and your kids will too. And both girls have already have ideas of how to honor her at their own weddings when the days comes, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Not a bridezilla but maid of honorzilla. We got invited to a wedding of a distant friend of my wife. She was a former work colleague. The bride-to-be's sister was organizing everything by email. Accommodation and food for 2 for the weekend, £200. Please pay into my account. Fair enough, they were getting married in a castle about 200 miles away, so accommodation was a necessity. No problem so far. Hen night meal and drinks kitty, £150. Please pay into my account. That seems steep for a meal at the local restaurant and a few drinks afterwards. We've organized a canoeing trip for the wedding party the day before the wedding, £100. Please pay into my account. No thanks. I had my shoulder strapped up from a sports injury at the time, so there was no way I was doing this. Salsa dancing class before the hen party, £50. Please pay into my account. I lost my shit with this one. I did some research and found that there was one place within a 20-mile radius of the wedding venue that did salsa dancing classes and they cost a lot less than £50. In fact, they cost the same amount if you multiplied the number of people on the hen party attendees list by £50. Then took away 2 places for the bride and her sister. So this bitch is basically setting up an awesome weekend for her and her sister, and everyone else was paying for it. Added up the costs of all her emails and she was expecting over £500 from us before we'd even left the house. We've been on week-long holidays that cost less. Email sent back, "We'll pay for our accommodation and food, and my wife's food at the hen party only. No intention of paying for you and your sister to go canoeing, salsa dancing, or getting drunk." The last straw was when the wife went off to the local restaurant with some of the other attendees in a taxi, whereas the bride and maid of honor had a stretched limo to themselves, which was paid for out of the hen night kitty we found out later. I planned to stay back and watch a rugby game in a hotel bar, but within an hour of her leaving she called me and asked me to come and pick her up from the restaurant as it was all the bride-to-be's close friends and family, and she wasn't being made to feel welcome. Not sure why the best day of someone else's life should be the most expensive of ours. I love telling this one because it's so damn fun to tell. My cousin got married 3 years ago, and though everything was perfect. I should mention that she is an alpha and is very jealous of anyone who is more successful. Quick side story. Said cousin had twins and is making everyone make appointments to see them, than she is. So, the first thing that goes wrong is that her father's girlfriend's daughter had to move her wedding up a year. It was on Halloween, so that her grandfather, who was dying, could see her get married. This pissed her off because someone stole her spotlight, and because of it she was bitter all day before her wedding. Second was that she wanted to have an outside wedding. Now this would be fine because of the fact that New Jersey is a very nice place to have an outdoor wedding. Except she was having it in New Jersey in November during a cold snap. The venue, which I had been to before for 2 other family weddings, said that they would have heaters outside if it was nice enough, but it was supposed to rain and she was hell-bent on having outside. Now at this point my grandmother is 84 and doesn't do cold well, and she was going to make her sit outside. I was not having it. While at the annual family Halloween gathering, she was telling us that she was going to have it outside, and everyone kept arguing with her that it wasn't worth it and that it was going to be too cold. After everyone moved on, I cornered her and said my 84-year-old grandmother is not sitting outside in the cold and will be watching the wedding from the windows and will hear everything through my phone. Needless to say, she moved it inside. She was also very annoyed that her brother had to bring his pregnant girlfriend with him. But that's another story. I used to work at a bakery that did custom cake orders, which included wedding cakes. The cake was scheduled to be picked up on the day of the wedding, and the design included fresh flowers to be put on the cake. The day before the wedding, the bride drops off the flowers to be put on the cake and quickly leaves. My supervisor notices that the flowers were dying and looked terrible. He made sure to take pictures of the flowers just in case the bride decided to complain. The next day, the flowers are placed on the cake and the bride arrives to pick up the cake, and she literally screams of disgust upon seeing the almost dead flowers. She yells at my supervisor saying that he ruined the flowers on purpose and that her wedding is also ruined. When my supervisor shows the photos he took the day before of the flowers, the bride became even angrier and threw one of the biggest tantrums I've ever seen. She tried to pick up the cake and throw it on the ground, but thankfully her sister stopped her. Her sister ended up going to the grocery store next door to buy new flowers for the cake, and the bride finally calmed down. Thankfully, it was extremely slow the morning this happened, so I was basically getting paid to watch this whole situation happen. A friend of mine set up a GoFundMe account, asking for people to help pay for her wedding. Maybe not entirely a Bridezilla moment, but the fact that she did this was pretty damn tacky. It's nobody else's responsibility to pay for your wedding. Either get married at the courthouse, or save money to the point where you can afford your dream wedding. I attended a wedding in Las Vegas, and the bride really wasn't handling the day well, even after she was married. Afterwards, we were all supposed to go to dinner at a restaurant in the Paris casino. The bride was walking through the casino in her wedding gown when a man standing near the bar congratulated her and offered to buy her and her new hubby a drink. She sneered at him and gave him an angry "no," then kept marching along. My jaw dropped when I saw this go down. Afterwards, I asked her if she knew who that was. She didn't. "It was Lou Rawls," I said. She blinked at me and had no idea who that was. "The singer?" I said incredulously. "He's headlining the casino tonight." She was really embarrassed after that, and she finally started to loosen up and be nicer for the rest of the trip. I just got married 2 weeks ago, I understand the bridezilla phenomenon way more now and sympathize with more of those brides. To anyone reading this, if you don't think you can handle a wedding, just don't do it. In US society particularly, weddings are somewhat of an expected milestone, but don't feel pressured into having one, especially if you don't handle stress well or have any mental health issues. I wish I would have made this realization before my own. I single-handedly planned a large wedding while studying and working full-time. No one could make small decisions on their own. My phone was constantly blowing up. Friends, family, vendors, millions of things didn't go as planned, and then I didn't get to sleep, eat, or have any privacy the last 3 days before the wedding. The stress broke me and I came out of remission from bipolar and emotional intensity disorder symptoms, and had a major nervous breakdown the morning of. People in my bridal party were all talking about it for the following week, and to them I'm sure I came off as a bridezilla because I was sitting on the floor sobbing, hyperventilating, throwing up, and didn't want to talk to anyone for a bit. It should have been a happy day, but it was one of the hardest days because I was the party planner for 120 people and multiple vendors. Eloping or courthouse judges are not disgraceful. If you have mental health concerns, don't be ashamed to take those options. Just my little PSA for the day. Take care. Do groomzillas count? The bride was lovely, but it has taken me a while to forgive her husband. On the day of the wedding, he turned up late and a bit tipsy because he was fishing with his close friends. Meanwhile, the day before the wedding, he asked my husband to set up all of the equipment for their outdoor wedding. I'm pretty sure that they didn't have permits for setting up there either. Anyway, so the groomzilla makes everyone wait in the boiling hot sun for an hour before he deigns to arrive. It was a particularly hot day and there was no shelter. Everyone was sweating and miserable. The elderly sat on the few chairs that were there, and everyone was muttering away. I nearly fainted in the heat, and that very evening I developed a fairly serious health condition. I don't blame the wedding for it exactly, but I'm convinced the extreme heat for 2+ hours contributed to it. At the end of the reception, the groomzilla was blind drunk. He started making ridiculous demands and generally running his mouth off. He demanded, among other things, that my husband and I give up the hotel room that we'd paid for to go to an absolute shithole location where some of his friends were hanging out. No thanks. Then he rudely asked me a bunch of questions until I literally turned my back to him and walked off. I doubt he remembers any of it. There are a couple that stick out. Usually they're just very overbearing and want to control the entire wedding. I am a stationery designer. I had one mother call me 17 times in 1 week, including on a holiday, but I didn't answer. Her cricks were inane. Move this over 3 millimeters. Make sure there is X amount of spacing between these lines. I was a secretary, so I know what that means. We got the proof. It's not the pink we chose. It's far too white. It was absolutely the pink they chose. I think we spoke on the phone at least 30 times before the invites were done. They stripped it down to the point where I was just a paper provided instead of a designer, and they turned out to be so ugly. I know you're probably thinking set better boundaries. And I try. I live in a fairly small city and I'm only one of 2 invite vendors. I live in constant fear that I'll get a bad review and it'll ruin my reputation because I've seen it happen to other vendors. I go way beyond what's necessary to provide good customer service. I'm just slowly losing my mind doing so, smiley face. I also had one bride demand I rush her invitations because her uncle's dying wish was to see one. I didn't really buy that one. Couple gets engaged right before New Year's. Immediately had planned a wedding in Cancun for November. At the beginning of January, demanded to know not if you'd be coming to their wedding, but the exact dates of your travel to from Cancun. She texted every single day for a week asking if we'd figured out our travel schedule yet. Turns out, it's a timeshare resort, excuse me vacation club, and they get a free night stay for everyone they con into going to their terrible wedding. So, all of their guests have to pay to go to Cancun for their rooms at an all-inclusive resort, and the couple is paying for nothing. And again, they never asked if we would be able to make it to their wedding. International travel, Amir, we hope you can make it, but understand if two can't would gave been nice. Oh, and the wedding is on a Sunday night, so matter how you slice it, you have to miss a day of work. Not that they care about your work schedule/vacation time, since 11 months before the wedding she sent out daily texts telling you to figure out your plans and to book a room. I'd expect them to get divorced soon, but I don't think anyone else would have either one of them. Thank you for watching. If you have not done so, please like and subscribe for more content. Until next time.